Welcome to the JMJ Commercial Realty Podcast. Dive into market insights, winning strategies, and the stories shaping today's commercial real estate landscape. Let's get started.
Welcome, everyone, to the JMJ Commercial Realty Podcast. I am Adam Schertzer, an advisor at JMJ Commercial Realty, and I'm joined here by Josh Cedia, the owner and broker of JMJ Commercial Realty. How you doing, Josh?
I'm fantastic. How are you this morning?
I am great. So we've made it to episode 9. We've made it all the way here, almost to 10, and it's been a great run so far. We've talked about who we are, what we do, a lot of different things about commercial real estate. But just in case someone happens to be tuning into this one for the first time, just give a little background on what we do. What is JMJ Commercial Realty?
Sure. So we're based in Massachusetts. We work in commercial real estate brokerage, and we're sometimes helping buyers or sellers, landlords, tenants. So more on the generalist side of things. Could be office, retail, industrial, all different types of commercial brokerage that we help with.
Awesome. That sounds good. I think you covered it all there. So today we are going to be talking about the power of follow-up in commercial real estate, where I think the power of follow-up is probably good for any type of sales job. So even if you're not in commercial real estate, I think you'd be able to get something out of this episode. So first up, why does follow-up matter?
Yeah. Well, you think about just how busy people are in general today and how limited attention spans we have. And as an advisor, as broker, different things that we're working on, we just have to keep on track, right? Keep things moving forward. So just really critical to have a good system in place, try and figure out what works best for keeping things moving, and ultimately, trying to accomplish what your client is looking to do. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know myself when, thinking about people that have contacted me and I've planned to get back to them and maybe, you put it on your list and it becomes the third, fourth, fifth, sixth thing and you get to the end of your day and there's not enough time and then maybe you get to the next day and you forget about it. So it's great to have people that are persistent and do follow up and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Um, and I think along that same lines is, I know I've brought whether it be, properties to certain clients, or if I need them to follow up on, signing something and getting a lease signed by a certain amount of time. It's not always their top priority, or I know with us, it's our top priority. Um, but their job is, running their business, dealing with their life and all that stuff. So, um, I think there's definitely a fine line between being annoying and following up, and but I think being persistent, doing that, I think you've always taught me doing that like 3 phone call follow up,
hmm
which I think is a good rule to go by. Not calling someone, and then calling them an hour later, then call them an hour later, but, call someone, you don't get them, you leave a message. If it's a time sensitive matter, maybe you call them back later that day or send a text. Or, if it's not, then, give it a day or two, then you call again. And by that third time, if they're really not getting back to you, kind of leave with that. You have some good verbiage. I'll let you say. What would you leave to someone on like the third call if they're not getting back to you?
Yeah, and every situation is a little different. It depends on how much time has elapsed with that third time. It might be that once a week you're following up, or once a
Mhm.
month, or it could be something a new listing, that you want to let them know about right away. But I would say after the third time, typically I have some language that will just be like, assume that it's just not a good fit or it's not the right situation for you. But if anything changes in the future, let me know, and kind of going from there. But and it's hard to say in a general way. I mean, it really just depends on the situation. But
Right. Yeah. All the different follow-ups are different. So with that, with different, situations, why don't we just chat about some real world examples that we've
yeah,
dealt with?
I mean, I think let's take I mentioned a new listing, right? Let's say it's not your listing, right? I guess I'll put it back to you. Let's say you
Mhm.
come across something, you're working with a buyer or a tenant, and you see something that's just like awesome for them. And from your experience, maybe it's something that if like they don't take action soon, it's probably going to just be gone. There'll probably be a bunch of other people that will see it, and then maybe you've been working with them for a year trying to find something, or 6 months How
Hmm.
would you leave a message? How often would you follow up? What would you do in that type of a situation?
Yeah, with that, I would first call, try to get them on the phone. Um, if I wasn't able to get them, then leave a message, and kind of state in the message the urgency of this. Found this great property that just came on the market. There's a good chance that it's not going to be on there that long. I know it fits, you know, all your criteria, price, location, everything for you. Please call me back as soon as possible so we can discuss it. Um, so I think in that sense, not just saying, "Hey, it's Adam from JMJ Commercial Realty. Give me a call back sometime." So the way you leave the message, I think plays a big part. Ideally, they'll see it and, they'll be like, "Oh, I got to get back to him right now." Um, if that didn't work, say a day went by, I didn't hear back, I'd probably call again, or maybe follow up with a text. And a lot of times when I'm trying to reach people, I leave them a message. Your voicemail can, get to the bottom of your list, or you might say, "Oh, I'll look at it later." But a text is going to pop up right there, and most people, look at their phones fairly often. So you could say something, "Oh, following up on that voicemail I left, please get back to me as soon as possible," like that. Um, so I think for that, something that's urgent, be pressing a little more. And I don't think that, they're going to think that you're bugging them because you're bringing them something that they've wanted for a while.
Yeah, that's great. When I'm hearing what you're saying, one thing that I typically do, if especially if I just have a feeling that like this is going to be a great spot for them, great situation, I will try and save that listing that I come across as a PDF and just put it in as an email and say, here's the address, here's the opportunity. Let's just say
Mhm.
it's a 10,000 square foot building. It's in this location. The lot size is about this. The asking price is this. What do you think? Could this be, a good fit? Any interest in trying to see it? So, some people, it's hard to tell, but some people are on their email all the time. Some people are more text based. Some people want to
Mhm.
just talk on the phone. So, it might not be a bad thing even in, you know, um, a CRM or a database when you have your contacts, just kind of knowing what their style is, what they prefer. I'm not good about doing
Mhm.
that in terms of like each client, what their preference is, but I might start with that email and then right after that, follow up with a phone call and just say, "Hey, I just sent you an email. Do you have like 5 minutes? We could just look at this together." At least
Mhm.
that way, visually, they have something that they can see. And then if I don't get them on the phone, I'll leave a message and say, "Hey, I just sent you an email with new property, and I think we should try and chat about it today if you have time."
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. I think providing that information in the email or a text to give them a little bit more around, what property is makes sense.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, just having a general message, just saying, "Oh, this is Adam," or "This is Josh, call me." It's very different than we've been looking for a while. This just popped up. It sounds like this is an awesome fit.
Hmm.
If you can put energy and enthusiasm in a voicemail message, I think that can go quite a
Yeah.
way to have them get back to you right away.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I want to talk about some actual examples of follow-up, maybe some that was following up years later where I didn't think that it
Yeah.
would make a difference. When I started here, um, you had given me a list of maybe 20, 30 people that had called about a property that we had listed up in my area. That for whatever reason, it didn't work out for them, but you kept their information. And some of these were like 2, 3 years old. And I'm like, I don't, they're not still going to be looking. They're not going to want, they won't even know who I am calling. And there were some that were like that, I called some up and like, "Who are you?" And then I'd say, "Oh, you called us about this property back in, 2 years ago." And maybe they'll remember and they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And then, at least it was a good like icebreaker, to call in. And out of all those ones I called, actually one turned into my first sale. Was a landscaper that had been looking for, property for over 2 years. He was based one town over from me. Um, I think it was probably within a week of talking to him, we already started looking at properties.
And you've
And
been looking for years, right, to try and find something, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. Yeah.
and he definitely was really appreciative that I got in touch with him. He wasn't working with anyone else. He had just kind of been looking on his own, and we built a relationship, and I think it was maybe about 7, 8, 9 months later, we ended up closing on a sale for him. And it was great, and I always come back to that example of, I didn't have to call all these people on this list there, and because I also thought that I'm like, no one's going to be still looking after 2 years. Um, but I think thinking about, commercial real estate that, someone can be leasing a property, or even own a property and working there for years, and maybe you just don't find that next one, for either expanding or a different location for a while because they don't come up that often. Um, so, that part opened my eyes as well. Um, that it sometimes takes years, even if you're working with a client consistently, to find that right property.
Yeah. And when we talk about follow-up, it doesn't have to be necessarily for a client. It could be for just things that, in your day-to-day kind of business that you're trying to do for yourself. You might look at it and say, oh, I need to 6 months from now, there's something I need to take care of, or it related to a client, but it might be, oh, I every once a year I want to check in, and do this or do that thing that I need to do, whether it's a personal thing or a business thing. But setting those follow-ups, taking those action steps is so important to be able to have a good system in place, whether it's on your calendar, whether it's in a CRM, whether you use Google or something else, but just trying to figure out a good mechanism to,
Mhm.
to jot those things down, and take action.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know you for many years had been using just a calendar, Google Calendar, and then recently we started using a CRM system. And has that helped you more? Do you find that with the follow-up, has it been easier using the CRM, or are you still getting
Yeah.
kind of adjusted to it?
Still getting adjusted to it, but I mean, it's great in terms of some of the automation that a CRM can provide. So, like, we've been customizing it with the company that we're using. And for example, if we have a listing agreement that comes up at a certain point, we might get a little reminder saying that, okay, you need to look at this, or we put in client information, and we have an option renewal, or their lease is ending, different types of things that we can automatically have the system generate reminders for things, which is great. So
Hmm. Yeah,
um,
I find that as well too, because I think the busier that both of us get, the harder it is to remember all these things, and if we have a system in place to set those reminders, those tasks that we have to do even months later,
mhm,
because there's a good chance we're not going to remember, 6 months from now to check on the renewal of a lease or something that's coming due.
mhm.
Um, so it's almost like having someone else at the company working with us, that keeps
Yeah.
track of all that.
But even, you look at the process of, someone purchasing a property. For example, you have certain dates for inspections, or you have an appraisal from a bank typically, or walkthroughs, and mortgage commitment dates. There's different things that kind of happen along the way, and being able to. And I'm thinking of a transaction I'm working on right now, and about a month has passed, and I haven't heard from the bank yet. And they typically have an appraiser that is going to appraise the property, so it's just following up to say, hey, when should we expect to hear it, and next steps for some of those things. So
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And if anyone is interested in learning about the CRM, we could probably do a whole podcast on that, but you can always message us and we'd be happy to give you some more information at podcast@jmj-cre.com or leave a message in the chat here. So another thing that I think is hard sometimes is what if someone ghosts you? I know that term has become, into society now with, more like with dating, you give someone your number and they never get back to you or something like that. So I know we've had instances where, we're working with someone, even sometimes I've had a deal that have been, an LOI has been submitted and things get accepted and then I can't get in touch with the person anymore. It's like,
yeah,
let's talk a little bit about, how do we handle that?
yeah, it's odd. In my opinion, it's odd sometimes to see that, because in this day and age, it's so easy, I think, to just send a text to someone, or to send an email and just say, what, it's just not the right fit. I'm not interested, or something came
Hmm.
up, or whatever it is. It takes 2 seconds, a minute, to be able to let us know. It can be frustrating when you're leaving multiple voicemails, you're trying to call someone or send multiple emails and you just don't hear back from the client. And especially, like you said, where you have like a letter of intent or an LOI on a property, and the landlord is expecting that you're going to go through with the next steps, and the client just
Hmm.
doesn't disappears. Or we've had situations where we set up a showing, and the person says, "Oh yeah, I'll see you then Tuesday at 10 o'clock," and that morning you text them, or typically I like to text them and just say, "Look forward to seeing you Tuesday at 10 o'clock," and then no response, just nothing
Hmm.
altogether. Um, so it can be frustrating, but I try not to take it personal. Who knows, what's happening? There might be a family situation. There might be other things that are happening in their in their lives that make it difficult. So I've seen it. I don't know about you, but I've seen it where sometimes, you send that text and say, I assume that, you're not interested or something else has changed or something else has come up. And then maybe they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I've been so swamped at work. Or, oh, I'm sorry. I had a family member in the hospital or all different things. I am really interested. It's just this time is not good. Can we talk next week or can we? So sometimes sending that extra message and, just saying, kind of putting it to bed and just saying, um, trying to wrap things up. For me, I like to have closure on things, one way or the other. But what about you? What do you see on the ghosting
Oh
side?
yeah. Yeah, it's tough sometimes because it's like, you know, especially with showings, I've had my share of showings where, there are no shows. Um, it and like you said, it what does it take? Less than a minute to send a text, and say, "Oh, sorry, can't make it today. Let's reschedule," or "I'm no longer interested." Um, and yeah, it's frustrating because it's our time. Sometimes it takes us, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour to drive to some of the properties that we have. And so it takes a big chunk out of our day. And if we're going to spend that time and go there and not get anything out of it, it definitely is getting frustrating. And I think it is sometimes hard not to take it personally, within those type of situations. Um, and I know for me, like I think anyone wants that closure part. I'm perfectly fine if they change their mind, if if something comes up. But it's that not knowing, that gets to me. For example, that one where I talked about we had a showing. We actually had, I think it was two showings. And then the guy met with the owner. They pretty much agreed to the terms right at the spot. And I was like, all right, I'll draw up the paperwork and then we'll get it signed. I got it paperwork drawn up that day, sent it to him to get signed, and then nothing, couldn't get him by phone, by text, by email.
Nothing.
And he just like disappeared. So that in my head, I'm like, is he dead in a ditch somewhere? What happened? Most likely maybe they got cold feet, maybe they, realized it wasn't right. But um in my experience so far with this, I don't know if, maybe I'm just projecting this, but I think people don't like to disappoint people, whether it's or people don't like to say no,
Mhm.
and I think that's leading probably into our next episode with being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that's an uncomfortable situation. People don't like to reject other people, even if this is a, more of a business situation. So I think that part plays into it, in some of these situations here.
Yeah. So I mean, it happens, and it will continue to happen. It's just, I'm okay. Just like you said, I'm okay with if they don't want a space or they don't want to move forward or whatever, don't want to work together. It's fine. Like,
Right.
just let me know. And there's so many other people out there who could benefit from working with us, and it's okay. But
Yeah.
it does. At least following up with them to find out like what's the status. And I don't
Hmm.
want to, there's kind of that tipping point. You don't want to be annoying, and but if there
Right.
is, at least a few times that you're reaching out, and sometimes you might need to follow up 5, 6, 7 times for a certain task or a certain thing along the deal, for a deal that you're working on. There may be reasons why you do more than 3 times,
Mhm.
but um, yeah, it's interesting topic here, following up. Yeah,
It
but
is, but
important.
it is so important, in our job, and I think any type of sales type job or any transactional jobs, where you either want to be able to get to the next level or know that it's going to stop right there. So then everyone can, if it's going to stop, then we move on to something else, and that's fine. Or if it's going to keep going, you keep going and keeping it on time. And I think with that, follow up, um, I think most, our clients definitely appreciate that. I think it builds trust, with them, that they know that we're staying on top of these, and thinking of, your thing with talking about the bank, knowing that if that bank, appraiser doesn't happen, the bank doesn't happen, then it could, kill the whole deal. And at that time, it doesn't work out. So that our clients, trust us to, not just, so here's, the offer, we submit it, great, go, and then we'll see it closing. That we do
So
those,
many
that
steps in
that
between.
consistent follow up and the timings, and to make sure that all these things um, get done. And I know the term you always talk about is driving the bus.
Who's driving the bus? Who's
Who's
taking
who's
control of this?
driving the bus?
Right,
And most of the time we're driving the bus. And
right.
if the bus driver isn't following up on their on their stops, then they're going to miss stops. They're going to miss people. Dropping people off in the wrong place. How many more bus analogies can we do here?
No, but I also think of
But,
like, I don't know about you, but I like having like making lists of like, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's, certain tasks, and, following up, being able to check things off and being like, all right, I got that, okay, I left a message for this person. Let me, push this out for a week or for a month, or someone told me to talk to them in 6 months. Okay, I'll put a follow up for 6 months, and it's fine. Whether sometimes someone says, hey, can you follow up with me next year? It's just this year's not the best for this. It's fine.
mhm.
Put a follow up for a year from now. So having that in your calendar or CRM or something like that is having a system as an agent, uh, is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is a great topic. I know we could probably talk for hours on this, but if anyone does have any questions, comments, definitely put them into whatever system you're using to listen to or watch this to. And you can also reach us at podcast at jmj-cre.com. And we hope to see you next time for episode 10. What's coming up in episode 10? We have a topic.
You'll have to follow up, listener, right? It's
Have
all
to
about the
follow up.
follow up. So
And if you
follow up
were
and find out.
if you were listening earlier, I think I did tease it a little bit. But stay tuned for episode 10. And we appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day, listening, watching us, and we hope to see you next time.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Ed.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the JMJ Commercial Realty podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of JMJ Commercial Realty or its affiliates. The information provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial, legal, or real estate advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals regarding their specific real estate or business needs. JMJ Commercial Realty makes no representations or warranties as to the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of any information discussed. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast is done solely at your own risk. By listening, you agree that JMJ Commercial Realty and its representatives shall not be held liable for any losses or damages resulting from the use of information shared.